Okay guys, welcome to the Legendary Azura analysis, comparisons, but most importantly build options and how to really utilize her and how she affects the current meta. Now, I'll preface this by saying Azura is completely unique compared to some of the previous legendary heroes we've had. She is on her own right, almost uncomparable to anything. We'll take a look at the stats first, then I'll give you the closest thing we have in the game to her, and then we'll look at some build options for her, whether that's budget or long term. Azura is an amazing unit. There's no doubt about it. And we haven't had someone as impactful as this since like Legendary Lucina or Legendary Hector before that. I think those are definitely the most impactful. In terms of legendary heroes, by the way, not including permanent or seasonal stuff. Definitely a very good hero. So let's jump into it. Azura stat spread, I think, is actually pretty predictable, as you'll see there. She does gain an additional 3 speed from her weapon, so what you're seeing there is her unequipped, and she would be having like 30-38. And you really shouldn't change out her weapon. Her weapon's really good. The only real other thing you would use is maybe a Blar Blade, because she'd be pretty good with that too. But that's like 139 BST, I think, and you know, for a dancer, that stat spread is pretty good. One thing I want to mention is that her HP stat is kind of lacking. And this is a weakness you might actually really dislike when you're hit by a tactics room. That's a very specific scenario, but one you really got to take into consideration. A melee dancer doesn't have this problem, and Azura may have that problem if you intend to use her in something like Ether Raids. Low HP can be both a good thing and a bad thing, and in this case, I feel that is the one thing that really is the thing I can nitpick about. Otherwise, that's about as bad as it gets. And that weakness can be overcome with light blessings anyways, which now affect legendary heroes. So if you had like 2 errors or whatever other mythic hero in the future, she won't even really have that problem, at least until tactics rooms gets upgraded. So yeah, there's Azura. First thing I want to show to you guys is Bridal Ninian on the far left. Now keep in mind, this is not supposed to be some sort of budget comparison. It's just really showing another unit that has the most similarity to Azura. And honestly, it's not really that close. One thing that Azura kind of brings to the table is buffs basically covering like the whole spectrum. Her attack tactic, the skill that Legendary Azura comes with, gives 6 stats. And you can pretty much dance a unit and give that unit 6 all stats. So that's really cool. You don't really have to use attack tactic. There's other ways too. A really cool mechanic is actually Earth Dance Seal 3. Dancing a unit gives it 5 to all stats right there, because the dance bonus comes first and then the prayer wheel comes after. So you can actually just literally buff all stats with just an Earth Dance 3 seals. That's really cool. But the closest comparison, of course, we have is Ninian on the far left over there. So Ninian is the same type. She's a flying blue mage. And this basically means that she's just similar, and that's really all that really comes out of it. The thing that I've shown on the left here is a unit that can buff all stats at the beginning of a turn, and this is what I really want to emphasize. Another weakness that Legendary Azura has is the inability to buff at the beginning of a turn. You really do depend on using Prayer Wheel to buff after a dance, and some units really desire buffs at the beginning of a turn. For instance, I actually believe the Ninian on the left side is better to be used on a Blade Mage team than a Legendary Azura would be, because you need those stats up front. You can't afford to dance and then get your stats. You'll miss a lot of kills. It's a little inconsistent that way. So that's just one little weakness to consider. It's not to say that actually Azura could run the exact same build, but if you already had a Ninian, you can pretty much accomplish that build on the left side. And it's one thing that really applies to most dancers. Upfront buffs is sometimes better than a buff after a dance. I think buffs after a dance are better used when you're giving it to like a tank who's just going to end turn somewhere. That's the best way I've used dances with buffs in most content that I've done. So Ninian on the left side, and by the way, you don't have to use like Earth Dance in the B or anything. It's just a way to show that you can buff all stats with one dancer. You could actually use Earth Dance 3 seal and then have like Torrent Dance, which is a far more available B slot, which gives you similar results. So anyways, Ninian on the left could buff all stats except 1 at the beginning of a turn, and that's really useful. And that's pretty much the extent of how much I can really compare Azura. Just consider what options you already have, and do you really need Azura to accomplish that? Azura's greatest boon as a character is the fact that she gives a unit 3 movements, an infantry and a flyer. The stats is just like icing on the cake and that's where I feel a little bit of the inconsistency comes from. If you use her in a way that grants mobility to hyper-aggressive player phase units, that's what makes her shine over any other option that's currently in the game, and that's why she's so good. Okay, so let's actually talk about build options for Azura herself. What I've shown on the left is pretty much your budget build for Azura. Like, there's not really much to change. You give her Fury, you give her Guidance, you use her on a mixed team comp, and she's good to go. There's not really anything fancy that needs to be done with Azura. She pretty much comes built out of the box. Moonbow, Fury, Guidance Seal, mixed team comp, good to go. Infantry's Flyers, let's go. That's really all there is to it. Obviously, Flyer teams, you want to use like Hone Flyers, maybe Flyer Formations, change out Aerobatics or that sort of thing, Wings of Mercy. These are all like things to play with. Do keep in mind, as I said previously, the HP is probably her biggest weakness, but also with the 3.2 patch coming in the future, that'll be less relevant because your Banes won't matter and she'll end up just... The best IV I think you want to aim for here is going to be plus speed, because support units aren't supposed to engage in combat too often. They just want to be tanking hits. So defense, res, speed. That's what I recommend for IVs, unless you're trying to make some sort of crazy offensive dancer, which I don't really see happening too often. So there's your budget. Just use Azura as you get her, change a couple of skills, you're good to go. Blue dual flying, for instance, would be used in like Arena, but that only matters if you have a lot of merges. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, if you want to actually use Azura in a way that's really cool, and assuming you get all the buffs after the dance, it synergizes really well, Prayer Wheel that is, synergizes really well with Dance 3 Seal. That seal just, the stocks went way up. So again, I'll reiterate it. You dance, the buff 5 defense happens first, Prayer Wheel's effect falls up, and you gain 5 tall stance. That makes it one of the best seals ever, if not the best one for Azura. Combine it with Wings of Mercy for mobility, or Aerobatics if you use it on a mixed team comp. Change out the C for like a seal, like Drive Speed. And yeah, different way to use her, still supportive. That's the goal of Azura, right? Just like most dancers. And finally, the end game. So if you want to use Azura in probably one of the best ways for like Arena Assault, by the way, she is really good there because she scores exactly the same as any other unit also using a dual skill. Gray Waves would be 400 SP. She's got a preference weapon. She's got the dual skill. So the thing is, her base kit is already good to go with everything you really need. You just give her Ether and Guidance, get her merges up to plus 10, and you're good to go. It's really that simple. Like, Azura doesn't really need much to make her shine. One thing I probably haven't mentioned in the video is if you did want to use some sort of offensive version of Azura, you'd probably want to change out her Prayer Wheel to something like Blarblade, similar to how some people use Bridal Ninian. You give her like Blarblade, then just give her Fury Desperation with like attack speed in the seal or something like that, or even attack 3 if she's too fast, and that's pretty much your optimized way of using an offensive Azura. There's not much to it. I mean, if you pulled some Summer Camillus, for instance, she could be a user of Juicy Wave. You could use Brazen Attack Res Seal, and then the B slot you could use something like Escape Route for some shenanigans that involve both dancing and offensive power. So these are some kind of more gimmick builds, but honestly, with support units, you shouldn't really try to invent the wheel. The prayer wheel. Get it? Okay, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. To summarize everything, Azura's a great unit. I don't really recommend necessarily pulling for her now. It's not really the type of unit you need, but definitely the type of unit you would adapt for. What I do suggest is maybe if you do really want to try out this unit, you could wait until when she returns with Legendary Lucina, either in March or April. I don't really remember what it was, but she is returning with Legendary Lucina, and that could be even better value than right now with Fjorm. Fjorm is really good for Arena, and Legendary Lucina is actually better for Ether raids. You could get even more value when those two return. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below on how you intend to build Azura or even pull for her in the future. What are your plans? Let me know. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Peace.